In last week's video, I told you the first 300 out of the 400 years history of Beijing under the ruling of nomadic conquest empires and took you to a few places in the city left from those empires. In today's video, I'll continue with this history and take you to the ancient city wall of the city Khanbaliq, the capital of Mongol-led Yuan Dynasty. For this period, we have records from the Italian traveler Marco Polo. Almost everyone visiting Beijing would go to the Jinshan Hill and the Beihai Lake. Today I'll read to you what Marco Polo wrote about these two places, and let's see if what he wrote was true. I'll also show you how the words of Khanbaliq evolved into today's second Ring Road of Beijing. Hello, I'm Yan. I'm in Beijing. Today, I'll take you to explore the city Khanbaliq, the capital of Yuan Dynasty of 13th century China. I'm starting from a place near my college, but this place has changed a lot over the years. When I was in college, the river was very dirty. It smelled so gross that every time I passed the bridge, I had to hold my breath. I always wondered what this place was. And today, I'll tell you the answer. The river was the moat of the city Khanbaliq. The hills nearby where the ancient city was. In order to prepare for the 2008 Beijing Olympic Games, the city government renovated this area. Now it's a park. The park covers the entire north side and part of the west side of the original city. The total distance between the terminal points is 9 kilometers. The water is much more clear now. There is a group of sculptures in the park. In the center is the Kublai Khan, who was the grandson of Genghis Khan. He succeeded his older brother Mongke as Khan of the Mongol Empire in 1260. Continuing on last week's story, before the Jurchens were able to conquer southern China, they were conquered by the Mongols. In the 13th century, the center of the world was in the Mongolian steppe. An empire across Eurasia was established. In China, the Mongols conquered the southern Song Dynasty. Although Kublai was the Khan of the entire Mongol Empire, it was a nominal role due to the empire's division. He considered China as his main base. In 1271, Kublai Khan officially established the Yuan Dynasty in China and assumed the role of Emperor of China. The second year, he proclaimed the capital as Khanbaliq, which is present-day Beijing. This sculpture is the map of Khanbaliq and its designer. He was a Han Chinese. Kublai Khan was very attracted to Chinese culture. From the beginning of his reign, he adopted Chinese political and cultural models. He also relied on his Chinese advisors. On the left-hand side of Kublai Khan is the sculpture of the Italian traveler Marco Polo, who came to China during this period. He wrote in his book,
"You must know that for 3 months of the year, December, January, and February, the great Khan resides in the capital city of Cathay, which is called Khanbaliq, and which is at the northeastern extremity of the country."
Indeed, Khanbaliq was the winter capital of the Yuan Dynasty. The Khan was more comfortable with the climate of the Mongolian steppe. He spent the rest time there. The Khan's summer capital was in present-day Inner Mongolia. In the park, there is a marble tablet. On one side are the sculptures of the Khans. Genghis Khan is the one on the top. On the other side of the tablet, there is a map. On this stele, there is a map of Khanbaliq, the Beijing Yuan Dynasty. Also, there are maps of its location compared to the Beijing Jin Empire and Ming Dynasty. This picture illustrates the relative position of Khanbaliq and Beijing during the Jurchen-led Jin Dynasty. Khanbaliq was much bigger and was located to the north of the old city. Marco Polo explained this in his book.
Now there was on that spot in old times a great and noble city called Khanbaliq, which is as much as to say in our words, the city of the emperor. But the great Khan was informed by his astrologers that this city would later be rebellious against his imperial authority. So he ordered the present city to be built close beside the old one, with only a river between them. And he caused the people of the old city to be removed to the new town that he had founded. As regards the size of this new city, it is 24 square miles, since each side is 6 miles long.
This is not correct according to the map. Actually, the shape of Khanbaliq was a rectangle. Marco Polo also described the city gates.
There are 12 gates, and over each gate there is a great and handsome palace, so that there are on each side of the square 3 gates and 5 palaces. For there is at each angle also a great and handsome palace.
This is not what the map says. On this map, there were only 11 gates. 3 gates on the west, south, and east side, but on the north side, there were only 2 gates. Not sure if Marco Polo had been to the north side of the city wall, or he just assumed there were 3 gates on each side.
It is walled around with walls of earth, 10 paces thick at bottom, and a height of more than 10 paces.
It was not until the Ming Dynasty in the 14th century that bricks were used in building the city walls. The walls of the Yuan Dynasty were built with rammed earth. Now small trails were paved in some sections. We can walk on the trails to climb over the ancient city wall. As to the layout of the city, Marco Polo wrote,
All the plots of ground on which the houses of the city are built are 4 square and laid out with straight lines. All the plots being occupied by great and spacious palaces with courts and gardens of proportionate size. Each square plot is surrounded by handsome streets for the traffic. Thus the whole city is arranged in squares just like a chessboard.
That is visible on the map. It's a common feature of cities in ancient China. And if you go to the Hutong in Beijing, you'll see the chessboard yourself.
On the north side of the palace, there is a hill which has been made from the earth dug out of the lake. It is good 100 paces in height and a mile in compass.
What Marco Polo referred to was the Jinshan Hill. The Jinshan Hill was indeed made from the earth dug out of the Beihai Lake during the Khitan Empire. During the Jinshan-led Jin Empire, the lake was expanded and more earth was laid up here. Gradually, it became a small hill, but not as tall as you see now, because during each following dynasty, more moats or canals were dug and more earth was laid up here. The artificial hill kept growing higher.
This hill is entirely covered with trees that never lose their leaves, but remain evergreen. And I assure you that wherever a beautiful tree may exist, and the emperor gets news of it, he sends for it and has it transported with all its roots and earth attached to them and planted on the hill of his. No matter how big the tree may be, he gets it carried by his elephants. And in this way, he has got together the most beautiful collection of trees in the whole world.
I feel Marco Polo might have exaggerated a little in the book to spice up his trip to China.
He has also ordered the whole hill to be covered with green stones. Thus not only are the trees all green, but the hill itself is all green likewise. And there is nothing to be seen on it that is not green, and hence it is rightly called Green Mount.
Unfortunately, there's no green stone now. Again, I feel Marco Polo might have exaggerated a little. I've never read about any description of green stones in any book.
On top of the hill, there's another fine big palace, which is all green inside and out. Thus, the hill, the trees, and the palace form together a charming spectacle. It is marvelous to see them. Everybody who sees them is delighted.
Now there is a pavilion on the top of the Jinshan Hill. It was not the pavilion Marco Polo saw. This one was built in the 18th century. Actually, there are several pavilions on the way to the top of the Jinshan Hill. I hope everyone watching this video is delighted. Although the hill is not completely covered by green stones as Marco Polo described in his book. What can we see from the top of the Jinshan Hill? Ta-ta! The Forbidden City. But it's not the palace Marco Polo described in his book. The Forbidden City was built during the Ming Dynasty in the 15th century.
To the northwest, there extends a fine lake containing fish of different kinds, which the emperor ordered put in there, so that whenever he desires any, he can have them. A river enters this lake and flows from it.
What Marco Polo referred to was the Beihai Lake. It can be seen from the Jinshan Hill, which was initially made of earth dug out from this lake. Khanbaliq was a nascent present-day Beijing. The present central axis of Beijing, where many important historical architectures are located, was the central axis of Khanbaliq. When the Ming Dynasty proclaimed Beijing as its capital, it shifted the northern city wall southward. That's why the northern side of the city wall of Khanbaliq has been preserved until today. It has been outside the Beijing of the Ming and Qing dynasty. It was forgotten, thus avoided wars and destruction. Sometime during the Ming Dynasty, the emperor decided to build an outer city wall. But halfway through the project, the government ran out of money. The emperor had to give up the project and build two walls to close out the gap between the inner and outer wall. That became the Beijing in the Ming Dynasty. Where the city walls were became today's second Ring Road of Beijing. Now you should fully understand the title of my last week's video, Beijing, a Legacy of Nomadic Conquest Empires. Watch it if you haven't. The link is in the description box. In next week's video, I'll leave the 400mm ISO fight for a while and go to a fortress in the south. I'll tell you a story happened several decades before Marco Polo came to China. It was where Mongke Khan died, which led to the division of the Mongol Empire. I'm Yan Yan. I upload a video every Saturday about sites of interest in China and histories and stories behind them. Subscribe to my channel. I'll see you next week in Diaoyu Fortress.